My story begins in a place of sterile silence, the kind that hums under the fluorescent lights of an airport terminal. I was sitting in a hard plastic chair at Boston's Logan Airport, my hand trembling slightly as I clutched my phone. It wasn't just the lingering effects of the anesthesia or the low-grade thrum of pain from the incision hidden beneath my blouse. It was a deeper tremor, a soul-deep exhaustion. Just 3 days ago, I, Eleanor Hayes, a 67-year-old widow from a quiet suburb of Denver, had lain on an operating table while a team of surgeons performed a new experimental procedure to replace my failing mitral valve. They'd given me a 60% chance of seeing another Christmas. I'd taken those odds. I had grandchildren I wanted to see grow up. Eleanor, he said, and his tone shifted, becoming the doctor in charge. You have just had major cardiac surgery. The last thing you need is to be wrestling with apps and trying to find a strange car in a chaotic pickup lot. It's not an imposition. In fact, I insist. Doctor's orders. That phrase, doctor's orders, delivered with such warm authority, made a small smile touch my lips despite myself. Well, I said, if it's doctor's orders, text me your exact location by the door number. Arthur and I will be there in 15 minutes. After we hung up, I sat in a state of stunned silence. Dr. Julian Croft, the man whose research was cited in medical journals worldwide, who had a 6-month waiting list for new patients, who likely had a net worth that could buy a small country, was coming to pick me up from the airport. A surreal giddiness bubbled up inside me, pushing aside the heavy cloak of sorrow. I pulled out my compact mirror and winced. The hospital had left its mark. I was pale, with dark circles under my eyes that looked like bruises. My good blouse hung on my frame. I'd lost 12 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. But there was nothing to be done. I applied a touch of lipstick, a small, defiant act of vanity. True to his word, 15 minutes later, a sleek black sedan that looked more like a spaceship than a car glided to the curb. The driver, an elegant older man in a crisp suit named Arthur, emerged and approached me directly. Mrs. Hayes, I'm Arthur. Dr. Croft sent me to assist you. Before I could respond, another figure emerged from the car. It was Julian, dressed not in a doctor's coat, but in a casual yet impeccably tailored travel outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Eleanor, he said warmly, taking my hand in both of his. His hands were warm and strong. I'm so glad to see you. I've been concerned. How did it go? The genuine care in his voice, the simple human decency of it, was a stark contrast to the cold digital dismissal from my own flesh and blood. To my horror, I felt tears welling up. This was the man who was rescuing me. But as I would soon find out, his kindness was just the opening move in a game I didn't even know I was a part of. It went as well as could be expected, I managed, blinking back the tears and summoning a watery smile. I'm still here, aren't I? Julian's eyes, that remarkable shade of blue, narrowed slightly. He saw more than I wanted him to. He had that gift. Yes, you are, Eleanor, and I am profoundly glad of that fact. He turned to Arthur. Please handle Mrs. Hayes's luggage. She is to lift nothing heavier than a teacup. As Arthur took my small suitcase, Julian offered me his arm. The gesture was so courteously old-fashioned that I hesitated for a second before placing my trembling hand in the crook of his elbow. The fabric of his jacket was soft and expensive. As he guided me toward the impossibly clean, impossibly luxurious car, I felt a blush creep up my neck. What would my son and daughter-in-law say if they could see me now? You haven't answered my question, Julian said gently, as the car glided silently through the Denver traffic, insulated from the noise and chaos outside. We were seated in the spacious back, a respectful distance between us, but I was intensely aware of his presence. I smoothed an invisible wrinkle on my slacks. How could I explain years of quiet neglect without sounding bitter or, worse, pathetic? They're very busy people, I said finally, the words tasting like ash. Mark is a partner at his law firm now, and Jessica, she's leading a very important new drug campaign at Innovatech. Julian studied me with that unnerving perception of his. I see, he said, his tone suggesting he saw far more than I'd admitted. And they couldn't spare 30 minutes to collect their mother from the airport after she had heart surgery. Put so bluntly, it sounded even more damning. I felt a sudden, irrational urge to defend them, a habit ingrained over decades. It was very last minute. I didn't give them much notice about my flight. Because you didn't know when you'd be discharged, he countered smoothly. That's how hospitals work. Surely they understood that. I turned to look out the window, watching familiar landmarks pass. I couldn't meet his gaze. I didn't exactly tell them it was heart surgery, I admitted in a small voice. Eleanor, just my name, but it was filled with such gentle reproof it made me flinch. The experimental valve enforcement you underwent is anything but minor. Why would you downplay something so serious? The question hung in the air between us. Why indeed? Because I didn't want to be a burden? Because I had spent my life making myself smaller to fit into the busy corners of their lives? He seemed to sense my turmoil and changed the subject slightly. May I ask something, Eleanor? Does your family know who I am in a professional capacity, I mean? The question surprised me. Oh, yes, I mentioned consulting with you initially. Jessica was quite interested, actually. She works in pharmaceutical public relations. Your name carries a lot of weight in her industry. Something shifted in his expression, a subtle tightening around his eyes. Ah, and did she ever ask you to try and make an introduction? I hinted at it, I admitted, feeling a new wave of shame. But I told her I couldn't impose. He smiled then, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to change the whole atmosphere in the car. Our relationship has evolved beyond professional, Eleanor. After all our conversations, I consider you a friend. Friend. The word landed in my heart like a seed in dry ground. I consider you a friend too, Julian, I said softly. The rest of the drive passed with him explaining the finer points of my surgery, making complex medical concepts feel simple and clear. As we pulled into my quiet, modest neighborhood, a strange reluctance came over me. The thought of my empty house, the silence, was suddenly unbearable after this brief interlude of connection. It was in front of my house that he made his move. While we were talking, he had discreetly taken a photo of us on his phone. Now, as I prepared to thank him and say goodbye, he was typing something. A moment later, my phone, which I had silenced, lit up with a new notification. A social media alert. Curious, I unlocked it. My breath caught in my chest. It was a post from Julian's public professional account, which had thousands of followers. It was a photo of us, him looking at me with concern and admiration. The caption read, "Honored to assist my friend and one of the bravest women I know, Eleanor Hayes, on her journey home after her courageous battle with pioneering cardiac surgery, a testament to resilience and the strength of the human spirit." The post had already exploded, and there, right at the top of the comments, was a name I knew all too well, Jessica Hayes. "Dr. Croft, that's my mother-in-law. We've been trying to reach your office for months regarding InnovateTech's new Cardio Boost project. This is amazing." I looked up at Julian, my mind reeling. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. And at that exact moment, my phone began to ring. And ring. And ring. A quick glance showed the screen flooded with notifications. 50 missed calls. 32 text messages, all from Mark and Jessica. They hadn't cared when I was a sick old woman at the airport, but now that I was a sick old woman sitting next to a billionaire doctor they were desperate to meet, suddenly I was the most important person in the world. The ringing was incessant, a frantic digital scream for attention. I stared at the screen, at the names Mark and Jessica flashing over and over, and felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing a scientific phenomenon rather than the mounting panic of my own family. Julian simply looked at my phone, then back at me, one eyebrow raised in a silent question. "I believe," he said with profound understatement, "that your daughter-in-law has discovered a networking opportunity." I let out a short, sharp laugh that was half sob. It would appear so. He insisted on helping me inside, carrying my small bag and placing it gently in the hall. He made me a cup of tea in my own kitchen, moving with a surprising familiarity, finding the cups and spoons as if he'd been there before. The simple domestic act was so grounding, so normal, that it made the chaos erupting on my phone seem even more absurd. We sat in my small breakfast nook while Arthur, his driver, made a discreet trip to the grocery store with a list Julian had dictated. You need proper nutrition for recovery, Eleanor, not whatever is in your freezer. Just as I was taking my first sip of the perfectly brewed tea, the doorbell rang. Not a friendly chime, but a sharp, insistent series of jabs. It was the sound of controlled urgency. I looked at Julian, my heart sinking a little. That will be them. Are you ready for this? He asked quietly, his eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath. A few hours ago, I would have been a bundle of nerves, anxious to placate and smooth things over. But something had shifted. Maybe it was Julian's quiet support. Maybe it was the raw, ugly truth of their behavior laid bare. Yes, I said, surprised by my own conviction. I think I am. I opened the door to find Mark and Jessica on my porch, both still in their work clothes, their faces a carefully composed mask of agitation. Jessica's perfectly highlighted hair was immaculate, but I could see the frantic calculation behind her eyes. "Mom," Mark exclaimed, his voice laced with manufactured concern. "We've been calling for hours. We were so worried. Why didn't you answer?" "I was resting," I replied simply, stepping aside to let them in. My voice was calmer than I expected it to be. Doctor's orders, you know. After major cardiac surgery. Jessica's head snapped toward me. Cardiac surgery? You said it was a minor procedure. Did I? I moved slowly to my favorite armchair, leaving them standing awkwardly in the middle of my living room. Well, it was minor in the sense that I survived it. There was a 40% chance I wouldn't. The blunt disclosure hung in the air like smoke. Philip stared at me, his brow furrowed as he took in the new pill dispenser on the coffee table, the stack of medical documents Julian had neatly organized for me. "Mom, what is really going on? First you downplay this, then you're all over social media with Harrison Wells." "It's Julian Croft, dear," I corrected gently. And Dr. Croft was my initial consulting physician before I was referred to the specialist in Boston. He was kind enough to see me home from the airport when he heard I was having transportation issues. The subtext was clear: when my own family wouldn't. Mark at least had the grace to look ashamed. Jessica, ever the strategist, recovered first. She slid onto my sofa, her eyes darting from me to the documents as if searching for clues. "Dr. Croft seems very attentive," she observed, feigning casualness. "You never mentioned you were such close friends." Here it was, the real reason for their visit. Not my health, but my connection. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. This wasn't a family visit. It was a business meeting they were trying to disguise as one. We became acquainted during my consultations. He's a compassionate man. Compassionate enough to pick you up in his private car and post about you to his 500,000 followers? Jessica pressed. That seems to go beyond professional courtesy. I looked her straight in the eye. Perhaps he simply recognized that I needed assistance when my own family did not. The words landed with quiet precision. Mark flinched. "Mom, about the airport, I'm sorry. We should have been there. If we'd known how serious it was." "Would you have been?" I interrupted, my voice still calm but gaining a steel edge I hadn't known I possessed. "Or would you have sent a floral arrangement to the hospital like you did when I had pneumonia last winter? Your time is very valuable, after all." The silence in that room was deafening. I had never spoken to my son like that before, but sometimes the truth needs to be said, doesn't it? What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have let it slide? Or would you have finally stood your ground? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to read your thoughts. The air was thick with unspoken words. Jessica, realizing her faux concern wasn't working, was about to switch tactics and reveal her true, naked ambition. And my answer to her next question would set the stage for our next, much more public battle. "So, how well do you know him exactly? His endorsement, Eleanor, could transform Meriden new cardiovascular drug program. I've been trying to get a meeting with him for months. Just one introduction from you could..."
He's aware of Meriden interest, I interrupted, thinking of our conversation in the car. The memory gave me strength. He seems quite informed about the pharmaceutical industry and about your persistence. The color drained from her face. I had landed a blow without even raising my voice. She stood up abruptly, smoothing her skirt. Well, we should let you rest. The professional smile was back, but it was brittle now. Yes, Mark chimed in, clearly sensing he was out of his depth. We'll check on you tomorrow, Mom. Just then, my phone chimed with a text. I glanced down. It was from Julian. Checking in on my favorite patient. I trust the welcoming committee has departed. Dinner tomorrow evening? I know a quiet place that accommodates cardiac diets beautifully. Arthur can collect you at 7. I couldn't suppress a small smile, nor did I miss Jessica's laser-like focus on my reaction. I'm afraid I have plans tomorrow evening, I told Mark, a flutter of anticipation in my chest that was dormant for nearly 2 decades. Perhaps another time. The next evening, I stood before my mirror, assessing my reflection. I was wearing a simple black dress, the most elegant thing I owned. Was this a date? The question had plagued me all day. It seemed absurd. I was 67, with a newly repaired heart and silver hair I'd stopped coloring years ago. Romance felt like a chapter from a book I'd finished long ago.
But when Arthur arrived in the silent, stately sedan, and I saw Julian waiting inside, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that made my breath catch, it felt very much like a date. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a warm welcome as I slid in beside him. "You look absolutely lovely." He took me to a private dining club downtown called the Summit Club. It was the kind of place I'd only ever seen in movies. All rich wood, hushed tones, and glittering city lights viewed from a panoramic window. The maitre d' greeted him by name and led us to a secluded corner table. He ordered for both of us with a confidence that should have felt presumptuous, but instead felt wonderfully caring. A selection of heart-healthy options that still sounded delicious. He raised his glass of sparkling water. "To new beginnings," he said, his eyes holding mine. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about books, about music, about his son, Edward, who was a humanitarian architect. As he spoke, I saw the proud father behind the famous physician, and it was so different from my own complicated relationship with Mark. Then he grew more serious. "I need to be honest about something, Eleanor," he said, placing his fork down. "Your daughter-in-law, Jessica, she has something of a reputation in medical circles." He explained that her company, Innovatech, was known for aggressive marketing tactics, often pushing drugs before the long-term data was conclusive. Her attempts to reach me have been relentless. 17 emails to my office in 4 months, 6 attempted approaches at conferences. This is where he told me about the lawsuit from years ago. He spoke of a young patient with a rare congenital heart defect. The surgery was a long shot, a last resort. Tragically, the patient didn't make it. The family was devastated, and in their grief, they were approached by a rival pharmaceutical company. They were encouraged to sue Julian, creating a media storm that, while ultimately baseless, was designed to tarnish his reputation and promote the rival's new device. "It taught me a valuable lesson, Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "It taught me to be wary of ambition that has no conscience." This new information clicked into place. His caution, his strategic thinking. It wasn't just a game, it was a shield, forged in a painful past. It made him seem not just perfect, but human. Just as I was processing this, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a frown creasing his brow. "I am so sorry," he said, his expression genuinely regretful. "A patient at the hospital is having post-op complications. I have to go." As he rose to leave, he did something unexpected. He leaned down,
his hand lightly touching my shoulder, and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. "This evening meant a great deal to me," he said quietly. "We will continue this conversation very soon." After he left, I sat for a moment in stunned silence, my fingertips touching the spot where his lips had been. A few minutes later, my own phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My heart sank as I read it. "I saw Dr. Croft had to leave you alone at the Summit Club. An emergency, or did he just get bored? Before you get in too deep, you should see this. Just a friendly warning." Below the text was a link to a poorly written, sensationalized article from a tabloid medical blog dated 8 years ago. The headline screamed, "Top Doctor's Fatal Error. Did Dr. Julian Croft's arrogance cost a young man his life?" My hands started to shake. Julian had just told me his side of the story, but seeing it twisted like this, in black and white, sent a sliver of ice through my heart. Was this Jessica's doing? Was she trying to poison my mind against the one person who had shown me kindness? The gala was in 2 days, and suddenly, I didn't know if I could go through with it. The anonymous email felt like a snake coiling in my stomach. I spent the next day in a fog of anxiety. I reread the message a dozen times. The phrasing, "just a friendly warning," was dripping in false concern, a tactic I recognized all too well from my years of dealing with Jessica's passive-aggressive manipulations. My head knew it was her, a desperate, dirty move to regain control, but my heart, my newly repaired and still vulnerable heart, felt a flicker of doubt. Julian had been honest with me. He had told me about the lawsuit. But the article was brutal. It twisted his words, quoted disgruntled anonymous hospital sources, and painted him as a reckless monster. It was character assassination, plain and simple. And it was working. The seed of doubt she had planted was a tiny, poisonous thing, but it was starting to grow roots. Could I really attend a major public event with a man who had this shadow hanging over him? What if people there knew? What if they looked at me with pity or at him with scorn? I almost called him to cancel. My hand hovered over his name in my contacts list. I imagined myself making an excuse. I wasn't feeling well. My recovery was proving more difficult than I expected. It would be the easy way out. It would be the old Eleanor's way out. The Eleanor who avoided confrontation, who made herself small to keep the peace. But then I thought of his kind eyes, of the respect he'd shown me, of the gentle kiss on my cheek, and I thought of Jessica's smug, calculated expression, and I got angry. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her scare me away from the first glimmer of happiness I'd felt in nearly 20 years. The day of the gala, Julian's promise of a styling team materialized in a way I could never have imagined. Arthur arrived not with a few dresses, but with a professional stylist named Margot and a makeup artist named Enzo. My modest living room was suddenly transformed into a high-end boutique. Dr. Croft was quite specific, Arthur explained with his usual British understatement. He said to ensure you felt as extraordinary as you truly are. I tried on several gowns, but the moment I slipped into the emerald green silk, we all knew. It wasn't flashy, but it hugged my frame with an elegant forgiveness, and the rich color made my silver hair look intentional and striking, rather than just old. As Enzo worked his magic with makeup, I finally spoke up. Julian told me about a lawsuit from his past, about a patient he lost. Arthur's professional demeanor softened slightly. A very difficult time for him, Mrs. Hayes. He was deeply affected. Not by the lawsuit, that was just noise, but by the loss of the young man. He pours that pain into his work, into making sure every other patient has the best chance possible. His words were another balm on my bruised confidence. The final piece of doubt withered and died. When the doorbell rang at 7, my heart fluttered, but this time with anticipation, not fear. I descended my own staircase feeling like a different woman. Julian was waiting in my living room, looking impossibly handsome in a classic tuxedo. When he turned and saw me, the look on his face, a mixture of awe, appreciation, and something deeper, more personal, made every moment of anxiety worthwhile. "Eleanor," he said, his voice soft as he took both my hands, "you are breathtaking."
Before we left, I took a deep breath. "Julian, I have to show you something." I retrieved my phone and showed him the anonymous email and the article. I watched his face closely for any sign of deception. He read it, his expression hardening, but not with guilt. With a weary sadness and a flash of anger. "I see," he said quietly, looking up at me. "She didn't waste any time." He didn't have to say who she was. "Thank you for showing me this, Eleanor. And thank you, more importantly, for trusting me enough to still be standing here, ready to go out with me tonight." He offered me his arm. "She wanted to put a crack in our foundation before we even had a chance to build it," he murmured as we walked to the car. "Tonight, we're going to show her that it's made of something far stronger than she could ever imagine." As we pulled up to the Symphony Hall, bathed in the light of photographers' flashbulbs, I knew he was right. This wasn't just a date anymore. This was a statement, and I was ready to make it with him, by my side. The Denver Symphony Hall was a glittering spectacle. A red carpet, flanked by velvet ropes, stretched towards the grand entrance. Photographers shouted, and flashbulbs erupted in a dizzying display. For a moment, my courage faltered. This was a world away from my quiet life of gardening and grandchildren. I was a 67-year-old widow from the suburbs, not a socialite. "Harrison?" I murmured, my hand tightening on his arm as Arthur opened the car door. I'm not used to this." He covered my hand with his touch warm and reassuring. He said, his voice low and for my ears only, "You don't need to look at any of them. We'll walk straight through. You are with me." He guided me onto the red carpet, a protective hand at the small of my back. He moved with an easy, practiced grace, acknowledging the cameras with a slight nod but never breaking stride. His confidence was a shield, and I walked beside him, my head held high, just as Margot had coached. Just before we reached the doors, he paused, turning us slightly towards the main bank of cameras. His arms slipped around my waist, a gesture that was unmistakably possessive and personal. He smiled down at me, a warm, genuine smile that the cameras captured in a burst of light. "Forgive the theatrics," he whispered, his lips close to my ear, "but sometimes a picture truly is worth 1,000 words. Or in this case, 1,000 frantic phone calls." Inside, the grand foyer buzzed with the who's who of Denver society. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto men in tuxedos and women in jewels and designer gowns. Julian guided me through the crowd, stopping occasionally to greet colleagues and acquaintances, all of whom eyed me with undisguised curiosity. He introduced me simply as my guest, Eleanor Hayes, offering no further explanation. The ambiguity was delicious. "Everyone is wondering who I am," I observed quietly. "Let them wonder," he replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. And then I saw them, standing near the grand staircase, looking completely out of their element, but trying desperately to pretend they belonged. Mark and Jessica. Jessica was wearing a sleek, cold-looking silver gown that probably cost a fortune, her eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk searching for prey. The moment she spotted us, she began to move towards us, dragging a reluctant-looking Mark with her. "Here we go," Mark murmured. "Dr. Croft?" Jessica purred as she reached us, her professional smile plastered on her face.
And, Mom, she glanced at my gown and the emerald earrings Julian had loaned me, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. We had no idea you'd be attending with family. She emphasized the word, extending her hand to Julian, her mission clear, to publicly claim a connection. Julian took her hand briefly, his own smile perfectly courteous. He said, "Mrs. Hayes," using her formal name, and immediately creating distance. "It's a pleasure to see you, though I must clarify, I'm not here with family tonight." He let the statement hang in the air. Jessica's smile faltered. "Oh." Julian's arm tightened ever so slightly around my waist, pulling me closer. He looked from Jessica to Mark, then down at me, his expression softening into one of genuine affection. He turned his gaze back to my stunned son-in-law and daughter-in-law. "No," he said, his voice clear and carrying to those nearby. "I'm here with my date." The word date detonated in the space between us. Simple, unambiguous, and utterly devastating to Jessica's carefully laid plans. Her jaw literally dropped. Mark stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. Your date?" Jessica stammered. "Yes," Julian confirmed, his tone pleasant. "Eleanor and I have been getting to know each other. It's been a delight." He then delivered the final crushing blow. And when I learned she was a cardiac surgery survivor, inviting her to an event benefiting heart research seemed the perfect way to celebrate her remarkable recovery. A recovery I'm personally invested in ensuring goes as smoothly as possible. Before they could even respond, a stunning woman in a red gown swept towards us. "Julian, darling, the board members are asking for you. And you must be Eleanor. I'm Isabella. Julian has told me so much about you." She took my hand. "It's a delight to finally meet the woman who dragged my ex-husband out of his work-induced hibernation." Ex-wife. The shock on Jessica's face was a picture I would treasure for the rest of my life. She hadn't just been outmaneuvered, she had been completely and utterly routed on the most public stage imaginable. Isabella, Julian's ex-wife, was a force of nature. She linked her arm through mine, effectively rescuing me from the wreckage of Mark and Jessica's ambitions. "Don't mind them," she whispered conspiratorially, as she led Julian and I towards the main ballroom. "Harrison never brings dates. Ever. You must be something special." Her warmth was so genuine, so lacking in any sort of jealousy, that I found myself instantly liking her. 30 years of marriage taught me to recognize your "save me from this conversation" face, she said to Julian with a wink in my direction. "Catherine," Julian warned, but her tone was affectionate. "Oh, hush," she retorted. "Eleanor deserves to know she's dealing with a certified workaholic whose last actual social engagement was sometime during the previous decade." She squeezed my arm. "I'm glad he found you. It's about time." We were seated at the head table, surrounded by major donors and board members. Every time Julian introduced me, he would place a hand on my arm or the small of my back, small proprietary gestures that sent a clear message to everyone watching. He drew me into conversations about art, about philanthropy, about travel, valuing my opinions in a way that made me realize how long it had been since anyone had, outside of my late husband. With my own family, my role was to listen, to support, to facilitate. With Julian, I was a participant, an equal. Later, I'd excused myself to visit the ladies' room. As I was refreshing my lipstick in the ornate gold-leafed mirror, the door swung open and Jessica entered. Her professional smile was gone, replaced with a tight, strained expression. "Quite an evening you're having," she said, her voice sharp. "Yes, it's lovely," I replied simply. refusing to take the bait.
She moved to stand beside me, her reflection appearing next to mine. "Mom, Eleanor," she began, switching to the more formal address. "I hope you understand the professional position this puts us in. My mother-in-law dating a key industry influencer, it's complicated." I snapped my purse shut and turned to face her directly. The woman in the emerald dress in the mirror seemed to give me strength. "No, Jessica, let me be very clear. My personal life is not a networking opportunity for you. It is not complicated. It is mine. Harrison has already established his professional boundaries with you. I suggest you respect them." She blinked, taken aback by my directness. It was a tone she had never heard from me. "I'm just trying to navigate a delicate—" "No," I interrupted, my voice quiet but unyielding. "You tried to navigate it with a nasty, anonymous email designed to poison my mind against him. Did you really think I wouldn't know it was you?" The color drained from her face. She was caught, and she knew it. For the first time since I'd known her, Jessica Hayes was speechless. "What I understand," I continued, pressing my advantage, "is that for years my value to you and Mark has been measured by what I could provide. Babysitting, financial support, a listening ear for your work problems. Now that I have found something for myself, something that exists entirely outside of you, your only concern is how it complicates your career." I paused. "I'm not angry, Jessica. I'm just done. Done enabling it." I turned to leave, but her voice, smaller and more genuine than I had ever heard it, stopped me. "He really likes you, doesn't he?" she asked, looking at my reflection in the mirror. "It's not an act?" "Yes," I said softly. "He really does." I walked out of that room feeling 10 feet tall. When I returned to the table, the orchestra had begun to play. Julian stood up as I approached, his eyes asking a silent question. "Everything all right?" he murmured. "Better than all right," I replied, a true smile spreading across my face. "I think I'm finally learning to claim my space." Just then, I saw Mark walking towards our table, his face a thundercloud of confusion and anger. He had clearly been sent by Jessica to try one last time. He stopped a few feet away, his jaw tight. "Mom, I think you need to come home with us. This has all gone too far." Before I could even respond, Julian rose slowly from his chair, his full height impressive. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Your mother," he said, his voice calm and cold as steel, "is a grown woman. She will go home when she is ready, and she will go home with me. This conversation is over." He then turned his back on my son, held out his hand to me, and said, "Eleanor, my dear, shall we dance?" And as he led me onto the dance floor, leaving my son standing there dismissed and defeated, I knew this wasn't just a single night of victory. This was the first day of the rest of my life. The weeks that followed the gala felt like living in a dream. My relationship with Julian blossomed, not in a whirlwind of passion, but with the steady, reassuring growth of a well-tended garden. We had quiet dinners at out-of-the-way restaurants where no one would recognize him. We took long Sunday drives into the Rocky Mountains, his hand often finding mine as he drove. He'd listen, truly listen to my stories about my late husband, Thomas, about raising Mark, about my love for gardening, and he shared parts of himself too. His passion for classical music, his surprising knowledge of poetry, his quiet frustration with the bureaucracy of modern medicine. Our physical intimacy grew with the same measured, respectful pace. It started with a lingering hand squeeze, then an arm around my shoulders. Our goodnight kisses at my door, which began as gentle pecks on the cheek, deepened into something more, something that stirred an ache and a desire within me I thought had died with Thomas 2 decades ago. One night, after a particularly lingering kiss under my porch light, he pulled back, his breath warm against my hair. "Is this too fast, Eleanor?" he whispered. "Is this too much?" "No," I replied, my own voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. I was surprised by my own certainty.
It's exactly right. But I knew the other shoe had to drop. The peace couldn't last. It came in the form of a text from Jessica. 3 weeks after the gala. Family dinner at our house Saturday night. We need to discuss recent developments as a family. The corporate phrasing was almost comical. This wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. They were staging an intervention. I dressed carefully for it, choosing not a soft, grandmotherly dress, but a sleek pantsuit in a deep teal color that Julian had admired. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. The pallor was gone, replaced by a healthy color. The defeated slump of her shoulders was gone, replaced by a straight, confident posture. There was a spark in her eyes. Their house was, as always, immaculate, a monument to their success. Success I had helped finance. My granddaughter Chloe opened the door, her face lighting up. "Grandma, you look amazing," she said, giving me a hug. "They sent your brother on a sleepover," she whispered, rolling her eyes, "so they can have their serious talk." Mark and Jessica were on their back patio, a stunning space with an elaborate outdoor kitchen. The air was thick, with tension disguised as civility. "Mom," Mark began, after some awkward small talk, we're concerned about you and Dr. Croft. This is all moving so fast. You barely know the man." "Actually, Mark, I've spent more quality time with Julian in the last 3 weeks than I have with you in the last 3 years," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I know him quite well." "That's the point," Jessica interjected, her hostess smile failing to hide the tension around her eyes. "You're emotionally vulnerable after your surgery. A man like that, a man with his wealth and influence, we're worried he's taking advantage of you." Chloe, who had been sitting quietly, let out a snort. "Oh my God, Mom! Seriously? You think Dr. Croft, a world-famous surgeon, needs to scam Grandma? You're the ones who are acting weird." "Chloe, that's enough. The adults are talking." "No," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "Let her stay. She has demonstrated more genuine concern for my well-being than either of you have lately." I turned my gaze to Mark and Jessica. "Let's be honest. You're not worried he's taking advantage of me. You're worried you can't take advantage of him." The accusation landed in the center of their perfectly arranged patio furniture and silenced them both. I had to say it. The truth was just sitting there, and I finally had the courage to give it a voice. It's amazing how liberating that can be. Thank you all so much for sticking with me on this journey. If you're still here, still listening, do me a favor and just type the number 1 in the comments. It lets me know I'm not just talking to myself and that you're on this ride with me. It means the world. The air crackled. I had called their bluff, but the final speech, the one that would redefine our family forever, was still to come, and my son's unexpected, vulnerable reaction would change everything.
The silence on the patio was profound. Mark stared into his wine glass. Jessica's perfectly composed face had finally cracked, revealing the raw frustration beneath. It was Chloe who spoke first, her teenage bluntness a weapon of pure truth. "It's true," she said, looking directly at her mother. "I heard you on the phone with Dad. You said if Grandma would just leverage the relationship properly, it could be huge for your cardio boost project at Innotech." She even used air quotes. Mark looked mortified. "Chloe, that was a private conversation you had in the kitchen while I was doing my homework," Chloe shot back. "Not exactly a state secret." I held up my hand, a gesture for calm. Oddly, I felt serene. The worst was out in the open, and the world hadn't ended. "Philip, Diana," I began, my voice steady. "I understand your concerns, both the ones you've stated and the ones you haven't. But I need to be very clear. My relationship with Julian is not a family asset. It is not a business strategy. It is mine. And it is bringing me a level of happiness I had forgotten was possible.
I looked at my son. For 20 years since your father died, my identity has been wrapped up in being Mark's mother or Chloe's grandmother. I poured everything I had into those roles because it was all I had left. I rearranged my life, my finances, my time to support this family, and I don't regret a moment of it. But that arrangement was a one-way street, and that street is now closed for construction. What does that mean? Jessica asked, her voice sharp. It means I am reclaiming my time, my autonomy, my life, I said. It means my choices are no longer subject to your approval. My choice to have surgery without telling you every detail. My choice to build a new life for myself. My choice to love a good man without needing to justify it to anyone. A different kind of silence fell. Not angry, but heavy with the weight of years of unspoken truths. Finally, Mark looked up and the lawyerly facade was gone. His face was filled with a raw, genuine emotion I hadn't seen since he was a little boy who had fallen off his bike. He said, "We just don't want to lose you, Mom." His voice strained. The unexpected vulnerability of it pierced my heart. "Oh, Mark," I said, my own voice softening. I reached across the table and took his hand. "You're not losing me. You're just finally meeting me. The real me, not just the supporting character in your story." "The version that stands up for herself," Chloe added helpfully. I squeezed Mark's hand. Precisely. Later that evening, as I was getting ready to leave, my phone chimed. It was Julian. Message, "Thinking of you. I imagine the tribunal was challenging. Call me when you're free." A smile touched my lips. As Arthur drove me home through the quiet suburban streets, I called him. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice a warm, comforting presence. I said, "Illuminating. I think we reached the beginning of a new understanding." He said, "I'm proud of you, Elivor. That couldn't have been easy." I replied, "Strangely, it was easier than I thought. Once I decided I was worth fighting for, the fight itself wasn't so hard." As we pulled into my driveway, I gasped. The porch, usually dark except for a single security light, was glowing. It was bathed in the soft, flickering light of dozens and dozens of candles, lining the steps and the railing, creating a magical golden pathway to my front door. Standing at the top of the steps, waiting for me, was Julian. I got out of the car in a daze. "What is all this?" I whispered as I reached him. He took both of my hands in his. "A celebration," he replied, his blue eyes shining in the candlelight. "Of courage, of new beginnings, of a remarkable woman who is finally claiming her rightful place as the hero of her own life story." He drew me into his arms, an embrace that felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. And then he kissed me, not the tentative kiss of early courtship, but a kiss of deep, profound certainty, a kiss that promised not a fairy tale ending, but a beautiful, real, and shared beginning. And in that moment, I knew with every fiber of my being that my heart hadn't just been surgically repaired. In every way that mattered, it had finally been made whole. Looking back on it all now, sitting here in my garden with the warm Denver sun on my shoulders, it's hard to believe how much has changed. That terrifying diagnosis, the surgery that I thought was the end of my story, was actually the beginning of a new one. It was the catalyst that shook my life so thoroughly that all the old broken pieces had to fall away, making room for something new and stronger to grow in their place. My relationship with Mark and Jessica is still a work in progress. It's not perfect. They are trying, in their own awkward way, to navigate this new dynamic where I am no longer just their ever-present, ever-giving support system. We have dinners where we talk, really talk, about more than just their jobs or the kids' schedules. There are moments of understanding, and there are moments of friction, but it's real. And for the first time, our love is being rebuilt on a foundation of respect, not just obligation. And Julian, he is my partner, my friend, my love. He has shown me that the heart, both the physical muscle and the seat of our emotions, has a remarkable capacity for healing and for love, no matter your age. We travel, we laugh, we have quiet evenings where we just read in comfortable silence. He never tries to fix my life, only to share it. He doesn't treat me like I'm fragile, he treats me like I'm strong, and that has made all the difference. My journey taught me that our value doesn't diminish with age. It taught me that it's never, ever too late to stand up and say, my needs matter, my happiness matters, I matter. It's a scary thing to do, especially when you've spent a lifetime making yourself quiet for the comfort of others. But the freedom on the other side of that fear is the most incredible feeling in the world. You are not just a supporting character in someone else's life, you are the star of your own. Don't ever forget that. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means so much to share it with all of you. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own voice in your family or your life, I'd be so honored if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And please, share your own experiences in the comments below. Reading your stories of strength and resilience reminds all of us that we are not alone in these struggles. Thank you for being here.